We are welcoming you, everyone, HMIS lead system admins, to the monthly webinar call. We've had a few technical issues in our platform here today. So my lips are moving, but you can't hear me. You need to call into the phone number. We really need everyone to dial in. You will be muted still. Normally, we would have you able to listen to us via audio on your computer, but we cannot.
This call is no longer being recorded.
My audio is scratchy, apparently. And I'm going to move my phone a little. This is going to be a good one, you guys. We're going to have lots of fun today. We have lots to go over with you, but we want to give you plenty of time to get onto the audio with us, which means dialing in on your phone number and using the code line. We will not be able to let you hear us via computer audio. We need you to dial in. I'm going to highlight this, make it bigger. Please call into the following number. Getting bigger and bigger. We're going to sit here for a second while we wait for everyone to dial into the phone number to be able to hear us talk. There will be no computer audio today. Even though that was what I said in the listserv message. Okay. Hopefully we continue to get folks dialed in. Melissa, will I have a sense of when we've got kind of a large enough amount of people that are on the phone, or is there any way to tell?
Everyone is on the phone and they are muted. I can see a large amount. So many folks have called in, which I so appreciate.
That's wonderful. Okay, I'm going to forward us on in our slide deck. We have plenty to cover today, and we definitely want to get to it. You should be on this call if you are an HMIS lead or an HMIS system admin. If you are somebody in the community who's just invested in the HUD SNAP data strategy and you understand your role to be some sort of connection to HMIS or the HMIS lead role, you should be on this call. If you are participating as a recipient or subrecipient or person in charge of some HMIS lead responsibilities for ESG, CSV, that should say ESG CD uploading due to CARES Act funding. Again, you are not going to be able to hear us today, unfortunately, through your computer. You do need to dial into the phone number and listen to us via phone. We will be recording this call. It is being recorded, and you'll be able to find the slide deck and the recording and our Q&A. We always offer a Q&A document for you, and we post those about a week after the call is over. So to get access to those resources, you'll need to be signed up for the Hub, and you do want to kind of try and stay active on the Hub. We figured out that it does some sort of purging every once in a while. We're not sure the frequency, so make sure you log into the System Admin Hub every once in a while and get your resources, including all the information that we have provided on past calls. Everything is there on the Hub. The screen is shaking, huh? That's a new one. I don't know what to say about that. So I will maybe it's because I'm squirmy and moving around so much. I'll try and stay stiller. So you are all muted, obviously, except for the panelists who are with me on this call. And when you ask questions, in a couple of ways, you're going to want to give us context if you're on the call and asking Q&A. If you watch this later and want to post a question to the HMIS AAQ, please give us context there. question is, what the topic is that you're asking about. So either give us a slide deck number of the question that you're asking, referencing the slide deck number, or tell us when you post an HMIS AAQ that it was about the system admin call, and maybe even a slide deck number in there as well. We just might have so many questions that it takes us a while to respond to them. We want to provide you as many answers as we can today, and we will work to do so, but sometimes the question we're looking at and answering isn't at all what's being talked about or on the screen at that moment. So giving us context to your questions that you have is really important for us. Thank you. I just want to acknowledge everyone on the call right now that you can see, and hopefully you're hearing us. So Fran is with us from the SNAPS office. Hello, Fran. Thank you for being here. And your TA providers who are on video today. I'm Mary Schwartz from Apps Associates. We have Meredith Alspa from the Partnership Center, Brian Roca-Priori from Cloudburst, Jesse Jorstad is here from Apps Associates as well. Melissa is helping us in the background. She's not on video, but if you have any tech support calls for the Adobe system, that is who is helping us with that. And I will quickly run through our plan today is to go pretty quickly through HUD updates and technical updates. We're going to talk about NHSDC and PIC count and some new resources available. We're going to go over some of the reporting stuff that's going on lately, and ESG CV, of course, is a big topic. We're going to spend the bulk of our time today, though, on the LSA upload process, and data quality reminders, and some all the ins and outs that we know of right now for LSA uploads, which is upon us. So if we have time, we don't think we will, but there's also some new system performance measures reporting out there that you have access to, and we thought we'd go over that if there's time. If there's not, we'll address that with the next call. There's more important things to discuss today. So with that, and hopefully we get through our transition to Fran. Okay, we're going to move to the HUD updates. I hear a little bit of stuff going on, and actually I want to pause and just ask Brian, is there anything bubbling up that needs to be addressed right now before we head into Fran?
Just a couple technology issues. People aren't exactly excited about the calling in format this week, but bear with us. We are working through this on our end just as much as you are on your end, believe me on that one. Thanks for bearing with us, but nothing we need to address on the webinar right now.
Right.
Well, then we'll switch it over to me, and I appreciate everybody's patience. This seems par for the course for October. October is always one of the most difficult months for HMIS leads and vendors and everyone concerned with HMIS. It's a heavy month for us, and I just want to let everyone know that anywhere SNAPS can be flexible and where we can advocate for decisions that ease the burden for HMIS leads and vendors, we try to do that, but I just want to express to everybody the appreciation I have for you all and the work that you do. We're very aware of the efforts that you put out, the innovation that you're doing, the reconfiguring of your systems that are happening around the effort, your COVID efforts, and the safety that you're trying to put in place for participants and for staff. And just want to thank you for all that work. I want to talk a little bit about some things that are going on at HUD, and also want to talk a little bit about the NHSDC conference. So I'm going to start off with that. Not everybody, I'm sure, is attending the NHSDC conference. The registration is closed, but all of the content from the NHSDC conference will go up onto the HUD website. So eventually you'll have access to this information. But I think it's exciting stuff, and if you do have access to this conference and you're registered, these are some things I think that you might be interested in looking at. First, I wanted to talk about the opening plenary that happened. It was with Norm Sushar, and it's been a while since he has been at a HUD conference.
A co-moderator has joined the conference.
It was nice that it was virtual, so he was able to attend and talk, and he spoke on equity housing and non-congregate shelters. And we also had Amy Bickford from the city of St. Louis, and she talked about housing surge efforts that are going on there. And it was a great presentation. So if you can go back and take a look at that, or after the conference, take a look, I think you would find it quite useful. The other thing is that there's some sessions coming up. I posted the ones that are over the next week or two. And the green ones, those are community sessions, and those in blue are HUD sessions. So you can take a look at those. Just some other recaps that for you to be aware of is that we offer an HMIS Foundation Certificate of Completion. So if you attend 4 of the 6 sessions that you see below during the conference, this is a certificate that we offer. There's a survey that NHSBC provides at the end of all their conferences. If you just indicate which ones that you attended, if you attend 4, we will then issue that certificate of completion to you by email. So you'll see that come out. The other thing that I wanted to speak about is some themes and the forum. So for themes, one of the things that we're focused on was around equity, housing, and safety. And this is really SNAP's focus right now, is we want communities to take a look at racial and ethnicity disparities that are going on in communities, and using HMIS is a really powerful way to do that. And there's some tools out that exist, and if you watch that presentation, it will you will be able to see some of the tools that you can use. And specifically, there's a COC analysis tool, and there's also Stella. So you can look at those things and look at disparities that may be occurring in your system that either are that are being created or that are being sustained in your system that you could address. The other thing to look at is to continue to look at housing. What's going on with housing? So are people getting moved into permanent housing? What is that rate looking like? And are you having returns to housing? So that's always important for us. And then using HMIS around COVID and how do you keep people safe? And so people are doing a lot of innovative things around using HMIS for that purpose. The other thing I wanted to talk about is HMIS flexibilities. Some of the things that came up in conversation around in the conference was something that's really been like kind of an old conversation. It's actually existed since the beginning of HMIS. And I realized when I was looking a lot at some of the polls that happened at that conference, there's a lot of new HMIS system administrators. A lot of people identified that they've only been system administrators for 3 to 6 months. So if you fall in one of those categories, if you're very new to being a system administrator, welcome. We're excited that you're part of this family. But HMIS goes back a really long time. And when it first started, we looked at different ways to model this. And what we chose to go with is to make these systems as flexible as possible, to allow COCs to take these HMIS systems and make them so that they will work best locally. HMISs are applied both for, they are implemented by governments, state, county, cities. They're implemented regionally. They're either rural or they're urban. There's all different configurations of HMISs. And we wanted them to make sure that they worked locally. So what we did is we chose to put in place statutory and regulatory requirements around what an HMIS should look like. But we gave the COCs authority to choose whatever system in the marketplace existed and then make sure that those systems then complied with that regulation. And we don't do a lot of that, like kind of monitoring or oversight on the HMIS. If we did do that kind of work, we would actually see very little option as far as HMISs went. So we allowed communities to do that. And then what that means is that then there's a lot of the responsibility that falls on the COCs to make sure there's good contracting in place, to make sure that the system that's selected is actually working well for the community. And we hope that we're providing resources to the community that help communities do good contracting and have good relationships with the vendors, because we know that can be very difficult for communities. So the other thing you see up there is authority. So the CSCs have the authority to select or designate as an HMIS for their system and change it if they don't like it. And they also can make a decision on what HMIS lead they want. So if the HMIS lead is not working out, there's authority to choose a new HMIS lead. We do right now are asking communities to be very careful about making those decisions because of COVID. We would like to see that limited right now because we want your efforts going towards your COVID response. We also have very limited TA available to support communities, and we like to support communities when they make these changes because they're very difficult. And we see a lot of communities struggle, lose data, have loss of knowledge when they change HMIS leads, those types of things. The one thing that you have to do is if you have an HMIS grant, you can't just change the recipient. You have to get the field office approval to do that. So I wanted for a lot of the new folks to hear that. Maybe if you've been around for a while, you might not remember those things. So I just wanted to revisit that. Also, on the conference site, there's a HUD question and answer forum you can go to and place questions. We are also asking for feedback for the FY 2022 HMIS data standards. So you can go and put in things that you want to talk about, or you can go to the AAQ. If you don't have access to it through NHSDC, go to the AAQ. I'm going to go through the last two just very quickly. The PIT count, people are asking about the PIT count. We don't have a decision yet. We're going to send something out on the listserv. We do know that we're going to want a sheltered count, but we're still trying to make a determination on the unsheltered count. It's really important for us to make sure that we keep safety as a priority and that we're also trying to reduce down the level of effort for our communities because we know everybody's stretched really thin right now. But it's not just a SNAPS decision. It involves other areas of HUD and other federal parts of government. So we have to make sure everybody's aligned in agreement before we can issue that listserv. So we'll do that soon. I've placed up some new resources. You'll have access to all these links. One of the things I just want to underscore here before I turn it over to other folks is that you saw this hopefully in the listserv that came out about the LSA. There's going to be some updates that vendors are going to be doing with the LSA. As you'll find out, we've made a lot of changes from last year, and it's because we got a lot of feedback in the process. Last year was the first time we did it, and there needed to be some changes, and so we did that. This is now the first time we're having you guys submit data into HDX, and there will be some adjustments that we need to have with the vendors. So we'll work closely with them to do that. So you will see a little bit of an iterative process in the very beginning. And we appreciate you being able to work with us as we make those adjustments with the vendor. So be aware of that. You'll see some, you'll probably see some communication from your vendors on that. And I'll turn it over to Meredith. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Fran. Yeah, Meredith's turn for technical updates. I'm just wondering if my phone is still scratchy because you sounded great, Fran, according to everyone. Hopefully mine's better. And it seems like just to address a couple of technical things, there's a desktop app that you can use that will make the screen not as shaky, it turns out. And again, you need to be called in, and we're sorry. We're going to have computer audio for you at the next monthly call. This is a one-time only thing where computer audio isn't available to you folks, but keep those questions rolling in as needed. And Meredith, technical updates.
Perfect timing. So you started falling apart there towards the end.
Oh, no.
Hi, everyone. I just have a couple of quick updates I want to touch on. I think we talked about this last month. There is a new PATH annual report. The vendors were given this new report with very minimal notice, unfortunately, this year. So SAMHSA gave them a bit of what they called a grace period. Instead of having it done on October 1st, they were given until December 1st to have this report done. In the meantime, though, PATH grantees can upload either the old version or the new version. So the 3.3 is the old, the 3.4 is the new. But if they're uploading that 3.3 version, they are going to see an error in a couple of the questions because there are new questions in the PATH annual report. SAMHSA is aware of this. The vendors are aware of this. SAMHSA is messaging to their grantees that they're going to need to either wait to do their upload or come back and fix those 2 questions prior to their submission deadline. But they are aware that it is an issue. They are being flexible and patient with grantees. Not sure if you all are getting questions. I know some of the vendors are getting questions about it, but yes, SAMHSA is aware that there are these errors, and they have instructed their grantees to just wait to correct it until after December 1st when the report is available. Some vendors will have it available as early as November 1st, but it is not due to be complete until December 1st. I also want to touch a little bit about HUD VASH data. Hopefully you all saw the listserv that came out a couple of weeks ago that HUD sent out on their mailing list called HMIS Participation and Update on HUD VASH Data Sharing. Many of you probably remember this topic coming up last fall. There was a plan for, I think there was actually a listserv released last fall, maybe even the winter, that VA and HUD were working on a way to share data that is maintained in homes, which is the VA's database, about HUD VASH clients for HMIS leads, to be able to have that data in the HMIS, to be able to improve coverage, use that data for analysis, planning, et cetera. Unfortunately, there were some delays, much like everything in this world, it seems like gets delayed because of coronavirus, because of COVID-19. So that got pushed out a little bit, but this notice that HUD sent out on October 7th announces that the report is available. It is available through the VA Med Center. It is the client level data for the HUD VASH participants in that particular VA Med Center. HUD has also been working on a tool with the intention of providing it to HMIS leads to be able to take this data that's coming from the VA Med Centers and be able to translate it into an HMIS CSV. This tool is going to be available, hopefully, the intention is the first week or so of November. Until the tool is available, the VA can still share this report with COCs. Worst case scenario, you have that data to be able to manually enter it into HMIS. Again, HUD has been working on a way to try to streamline that process, to automate that process somehow using an import. But again, worst case scenario, you will be able to manually enter that data. As noted in the listserv that HUD sent out, HUD is recommending that leads focus on incorporating this data no later than the 2021 housing inventory count, and that you spend the final months of 2020 working to identify or resolve any potential issues with getting this data into your HMIS. And I should add also, you know, HUD absolutely recognizes everything that's going on in October. Like Fran said, October is a tough month in general, and in particular this year with ESG CV reporting and a pandemic. So they're very much aware of that, but still want to encourage you to spend the latter months of this year working on getting that issues resolved so that it's there for your HIC. Just a little bit about the report and the tool. So VA and HUD worked together for several months, crosswalking the data that's in homes to the data that is that goes in HMIS for the most part. That was pretty straightforward and easy to do. However, there are some pieces that are missing. For instance, 3.16 is not available. It's not collected in homes, so that is not available. Some elements of 3.917B are also not available. However, again, almost all of the other universal data elements, as well as a couple of the veteran-specific elements, are available. The data is not going to be available by COC. So if there's multiple COCs in a single VA catchment area, you're going to have to work together with your VA Med Center contact to make sure that you've got the right clients getting included in the report and therefore in your HMIS. The data that comes from the VA Med Center is being exported in a non-HMIS CSV format, it's a flat file with the data. But the tool that HUD is working on producing is a translator tool that will convert that one single file into the HMIS CSV files. That file or that tool is currently being beta tested, and again, the intention is to release it in early November. you're not required to use this tool. We know, HUD knows, VA knows that there are some communities that have a working relationship with their VA Med Center. There is an existing process in place for getting that data from homes into HMIS. You can keep doing that if it is working for you. There is no reason to change something if it is currently working for your system. So a couple action steps. Your COC should be establishing a single point of contact for the VA Med Center. Having this single point of contact is going to make this process a lot smoother, reduce confusion, and just make it hopefully a more streamlined process to have those real clearly identified single points of contact. The VA will provide this data via a secure email transmission, and then the HMIS leads will be the ones getting the data into HMIS in whatever form that is, whether it's using the tool, using a different vendor import tool, manually entering the data, whatever works in your COC. But I think in the coming weeks and coming months, really taking a look at what your capacity is for getting this data in, your technical capacity for getting the data in and having these conversations with vendors is going to be really important. I'm going to pause there for a second because it looked like there were questions that were coming in.
Yeah, there's a couple. So for the HUD VASH data, is there going to be a requirement for the vendors to correctly import the CSV?
There's not a requirement per se. That would be, the sort of standard answer. That goes back to your agreement with your vendor, and different vendors have different capabilities and different tools available to their customers for doing an import. So it's going to be on a probably case-by-case basis with the vendor.
Mary, were there any other ones that you wanted to address? If your headphones are working.
Yeah, I think I switched out. Are we a little less shaky, or is it still bad?
It's not bad.
Halfway there.
I'm so sorry. No, I'll keep answering them in writing, but we'll make sure to get an answer. It's basically like, is this required? It's not. It's meant to help COCs increase their participation rate. So, but I'll keep addressing the written questions for folks if we want to move on past this topic.
Yeah, can I say what you just said again, because it was a little broken up. The intention here is to improve or increase the coverage in HMIS, and HUD and VA both realize over several years at this point there has been a struggle between VA and HUD in getting this data into HMIS. So this was a solution that they both agreed upon as a way to get the data from VA to the COCs, just to resolve the issue for good. So the data is available to the COCs so that they can get it into the HMIS so that they can have that data coverage included for their inventory. Okay, so I'll move on. Mary, let me know if there's anything else I need to say. Just real quickly about ESG-CV. As you all hopefully know, ESG-CV reporting is happening now. It is due at the end of the month by the ESG recipient. If you haven't heard from your ESG-CV or your ESG recipient at this point, you might want to go check on them and see if they need anything from you. It's entirely possible that they don't, if there are not agreements in place, that they haven't spent the money to serve clients, that's possible that they don't, but we just want to make sure that you're aware this is happening. We also noticed an issue that's around project setup, so I just wanted to highlight it here. When there are multiple projects being created in HMIS for a single ESG-CV funded project, so a single rapid rehousing project that is being split into 2 projects in the HMIS, and then when you go to create your bundle on that project, it looks like there's 2 projects instead of 1. We've heard that there are some folks experiencing issues with errors in their upload. If that's happening to you, please submit an AAQ to SAGE. If you have any questions about how those bundles are being accepted or rejected, please reach out to the SAGE desk. Also want to flag that similar to ESG, as written in the ESG program manual, there shouldn't be any services-only projects set up in HMIS for ESG-funded projects. Only legal service providers should have those services-only projects. So this would be one of those times where if you have multiple agencies, you know, one providing service, one providing financial assistance, setting up a single project in the HMIS that they both have access to will resolve that issue. So having that single project where one is doing services, one is doing financial assistance, I guess, will resolve that issue. So again, though, if you're experiencing issues with bundle uploads or errors that you don't understand, please submit a question to the SAGE desk. That will make it get through the sort of triage process a little faster also, so there's no delays as we get 9 days out from the deadline.
Your conference is being recorded.
Okay. So the LSA, we're all excited. It's that time of year. We've been waiting for this to come. To pause for a second about what the LSA is, it stands for Longitudinal System Analysis, and it is the data that is being exported from your HMIS, uploaded into HDX 2.0. That data is the basis for the annual homeless assistance report or assessment report that goes to Congress. It is the main source of information that Congress gets about homelessness. So that's why there's all this effort to get your data and to have it be as accurate as possible. Next slide.
Thank you. You can do the slides too if you want. You have the ability
I
to
can keep my job.
Yeah,
The power of the
right.
Well, thank you. In that case, I shall be self-sufficient and do it myself. Okay. So we expect that a submission guide will be released later this week that will have instructions about how to submit your data. So keep an eye out for that. I wanted to highlight some of the differences between this year and the last time that we did this. So as Fran mentioned, this isn't the first time. And so therefore, we've learned a lot of lessons and we have a better sense of what to expect in the process. Another piece is that last round, people submitted their data, there was a long pause, and then there was a long period of time of data cleaning. That's going to feel like a much more continuous and iterative process this year. We've refined the data quality review process to collapse the number of flags that are related to a single issue. So that way the flag file, which we're not calling the error and warning file, isn't as overwhelming. It's a little easier to navigate. We've also identified issues that may not affect the usability of your data, and we've removed those from the cleaning process, again, to try to reduce the amount of material that you have to navigate through in your error and warning file. That file has been reformatted for navigation. And then the other piece is that rather than that file being transmitted through email, it's actually going to be something that you'll download from HDX. So there'll be more information about that in the submission guide. And then also there are office hours next week, which I'll talk about in a minute, that's going to go through that a little bit more in depth. Okay, is there a trick to advance the slide?
The bottom of the screen on the left is an arrow.
Thank you. Excellent. Okay. Hashtag new guy problem. Okay. So another big difference this year is that you'll actually be submitting the data for 2 years. So fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 2020. Right now we are in the initial upload phase, which goes, so it started on the 19th all the way through October 30th. During that time, you should be working to submit one LSA file per reporting period. And the goal of this initial upload period is for communities to acclimate to the updated user interface and ensure that staff have proper permissions. We've been getting a lot of requests from COCs lately to change who their primary contact is. That is a little bit of a process. It's not just like a couple of button clicks. So please make sure, if you haven't already, that the person who needs to be the primary contact has been updated for your community. Also going to allow communities to receive the support from their vendors or LSA support staff via the Ask the Question function in the event that there are errors that are actually preventing you from uploading. During this time, vendors are going to continue to adjust their code if additional issues are identified during the upload process. There's been a lot of testing that's gone on so far, so hopefully we've taken care of the bulk of stuff, but there's always things that come up when the real data comes in. Okay. Other thing I want to let you know about is that during this initial upload period, there will be error and warning files that are being generated about the data that you've submitted. The purpose of the files during that time frame is so the vendors can continue to review and, if necessary, refine their code. It is not the expectation that during this initial upload period, you are reviewing those error and warning files. Now, you can choose to review them if you'd like, but one of the risks of doing that during this period is that you might be trying to solve for problems that are actually in your vendor's code. So just be aware of that. Communication related to errors and warnings will be done with your data liaison, who is somebody, it's an app employee who's assigned to your region. COCs have not been assigned these liaisons yet. That will happen after the initial period. You should direct any questions that you have throughout the upload period to AAQ. We've increased the number of staff that are reviewing and responding to those issues, and we encourage you to use that tool. Okay, so just an overall timeline. So again, the initial upload period is through the 30th of October. Files will be processed for errors and data warnings following that. Communities will then be assigned their data liaison to review their data and work with them to resolve errors and warnings. This is slated to begin in November. Issues are communicated through that errors and warnings file. You'll receive a notification about the file from your data liaison. Data uploads are expected to continue through November as part of that data cleaning process, and communities will work with their liaisons through the end of the year. This is not going to go on forever. It will go on through the end of the year. Okay, just to review a few key points, the initial upload period ends on October 30th. What do you need to do during this time? You need to upload one file for each reporting period, fiscal year 19, fiscal year 20. Do you need to review your errors and warning files during this initial upload period? No, you do not. You can do so if you would like. When do you need to review that file? After October 30th, after you've been assigned a data liaison and those communications have started. How long are we going to work on data cleanup? Through the end of the year. Okay. Sometimes I just tell myself, like, eventually February is going to be here. And that's how I think about the LSA. Someday it's going to be February, and this will be a memory. Okay, a heads up about Stella. So the ability to stellarize your data set has been disabled temporarily to ensure that the uploading of data does not result in performance issues during the initial upload phase. Stellavizing will be re-enabled in early November. I heard from another TA provider earlier today that there are some communities in California who have kind of an urgent need to stellarize their data. We are looking into that to see if we can find a solution around that, and your TA provider will be in touch once we have an answer on that. Okay, so let's talk a bit about data quality. This information was first presented in February 2020. These are logical data quality reminders that you can use as part of your overall strategy for data quality. Correcting these issues now will reduce or eliminate errors during your uploads. And these checks are applicable to any system-wide reporting, so we encourage you to review them all. Okay. The HMIS lead has a role to identify duplicate records, and your application must have the functionality to deduplicate those records. Only data associated with valid enrollment in continuum projects are included in the system-wide reporting. So at a minimum, it has to have an entry date a personal ID, project ID, household ID, a valid relationship to household, and enrollment COC associated with the head of household enrollment ID. Data that are not associated with a valid enrollment, for example, if there were bed nights without a valid enrollment, are just excluded from the report. For any given household ID, there must be exactly one enrollment record where the relationship to head of household equals 1, also known as self. When I say exactly 1, I mean not 0 and not 2 or 5. It has to be 1. Otherwise, those enrollments are going to be excluded from the LSA and might be excluded from other system-wide reporting. For emergency shelter, safe haven, transitional housing, an exit date must be at least 1 day later than the entry date. You cannot enter and exit on the same date. Clients with rapid rehousing enrollments in the report period where the move-in date is equal to the exit date will be counted as housed in rapid rehousing during the report period. Clients with PSH enrollments in the report period where the move-in date is equal to the exit date will not be counted as housed in permanent supportive housing during the report period. So rapid rehousing, you are counted. Permanent supportive housing, you are not counted. For night-by-night emergency shelter, an exit date must be 1 day after the last recorded bed night. Otherwise, reporting may need to use an effective exit date, which would be your last bed night plus 1. And then the destination will be reported as unknown. So if you look at this chart here, you can see that they enrolled and had a bed night on the 1st of January, another bed night on the 2nd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and they also had a bed night on the 10th. However, the program exited them on the 10th. So even if a destination was recorded here, the LSA logic will overwrite this, move the exit date over to the 11th, and will set the destination to unknown. So you might want to run a query where that final bed night equals the exit date and go through and make sure that those are adjusted correctly. Okay, auto exit. So night-by-night emergency shelter clients are to be auto exited after an extended period of time without a bed night. For any night-by-night shelter enrollment, where the most recent bed night is 90 or more days prior to the report end, and there is no record of an exit, the LSA reporting procedures will use an effective exit date of the last bed night plus 1, and the destination will be reported as unknown. The exit date must be less than or equal to the operating end date for the project. If there are enrollments that remain open after a project's operating end date, for example, they don't have an exit date or that exit date is later than the project end date, the LSA reporting procedures will use the operating end date as the effective end date or exit date, and the destination will again be reported as unknown. So these are all really important when you think about your missing rate for exit destinations. If it's not lining up with your understanding of your system, these are some of the things that might be going on as to why the LSA is showing a higher rate than you were expecting. We'll continue to compare the LSA with the HIC, start and end dates for projects and inventory, plus the inclusion of both the participating and non-participating projects in HMIS, mean that we should be able to calculate the inventory on the date of each COC's HIC from their HMIS record. So we'll continue to be looking at that and request for adjustments to be made so that way your HIC is reflective of your LSA on that date. Bed-in-unit inventory, remember that in HMIS and for reporting, dedicated beds refer to the beds that are dedicated to the population group and also their household members. So not just the person who qualifies as chronically homeless, but everybody who's in that household as well. In terms of other cleanup, seasonal beds must have an end date. Bed counts have to be greater than or equal to unit count. Every shelter project must have a bed type. Projects and inventories need start and end dates. Active projects with no active inventory records are going to cause reporting issues. Few more cleanup issues. So in terms of geography in your HMIS, if you're missing geocodes or zip codes, or if they are unrecognized, invalid, if they're in the wrong format, or they're outside of your geography. Those are all going to cause reporting issues. Or if you have more than one of the same COC code for a single project, projects must operate entirely within a single COC. Project participation and project descriptor data elements. A project with clients served during the reporting period, but the PDDEs say that it doesn't participate in HMIS. So if you have a project that is labeled as non-participating in HMIS, but you have client records during that time frame, that's going to cause an issue. Missing client assigned project data in HMIS, so make sure that all the PDDES, yeah, that's a terrible acronym. We should really work on that, guys. Okay, make sure that those descriptor elements are complete. And for all projects in your HIC, regardless of if they participate in HMIS by collecting the client level data, projects missing those data elements will cause reporting issues for both projects and for the clients in those projects. So that can be the kind of situation where you end up having a lot of flags because it's one single issue that's going on, but it's causing kind of this cascading effect. In terms of funding sources, projects with dedicated funding sources, such as VA or RI, but they have 0 such dedicated beds, so no beds that are dedicated to veterans or youth. That's going to cause a problem. If you have an incompatible funding source in a single project, so for example, if you had ESG attached to a permanent supportive housing project, if that is invalid, ESG doesn't fund permanent supportive housing, that's going to cause a flag. Okay, so I know that we're all anxious to learn more about exactly how this process is going to happen and exactly how we get everything uploaded and whatnot. A lot of those answers are going to happen during the office hours on October 28th. So it happens from 2:30 to 4 o'clock Eastern time. One of the main things that they're going to go over during those office hours is a review of the error and warning file, including the new structure of that file, tips for navigating the file, and then also expectations around recording notes for warnings and things of that nature. So you can click on the link below here to make sure that you have the office hours information. And that's all I have. Back to Mary.
I'm going to jump in real quick, Jesse, with a couple of questions that came in. First is, should the initial uploads be marked for official use or for local only?
Yeah, so that's up to you. It doesn't sort of matter on our end initially. So if you just want to upload a file to see what kind of errors you're going to get, and you're just kind of working through that process, it's totally fine to put it as local use only if you want. You will have to change it to an official upload in order to officially submit that. The other thing to know, though, is that if you have already submitted an official upload, you have to go in and change that to a local use only or delete it in order to upload a new official upload. You can only have one official upload per recording period at a time.
And what happens if their files continue to get rejected and they cannot provide an official upload by the deadline?
Then we will continue to work with you, and you will continue to work with your vendor, and everybody will try their best to get to a resolution. So there's quite a lot of support that's available. There's a pretty high level of staffing attached to this project.
There's a couple people who are experiencing an error with the federal funding source for ESG-CV. Is that a known issue?
Yeah, so I did see that pop up in my inbox just before this meeting, and I will be investigating that and be responding back through AAQ as soon as we have that resolved.
All right, a couple more. We're getting a federal funding source warning for all projects that are not federally funded and therefore do not have a federal funding source selected. Is HUD requiring the admin data on projects that they do not fund?
There are some details around this in the data standards. I would need to review them specifically, but I feel really confident that we can resolve that issue. You may want to go ahead and submit an AAQ, and I can loop back with you on that end.
There was a question about confirming the date for the office hours, so I just moved the slide back, October 28th from 2:30 to 4:30 Eastern. There is not a link for it yet. It will go out once that is available. And Mary, did you see anything else that we need to address right now?
I saw quite a few coming in, Meredith. I'm wondering if you want to go over the whole, how do you get a bash file for your COC issue? Several people are concerned that they're not going to be able to shrink the data down to their COC.
Yep.
They want to switch back.
I was just answering that. So the filtering of these client records is happening on the VA's end. The VA is not going to send you every HUD bash participant in homes necessarily, especially if there are multiple COCs that are included in that catchment area. They're not, they can't just send that data willy-nilly around, right? Because we're talking about client level data. So the filtering will happen on their end. That's where I think both HUD's messaging and what I was saying earlier is going to be so important, working with the VA and having those points of contact so that you can reduce the number of client level data files you're getting, right? Like, so that you're not getting every single participant that's in homes. You are only getting those that are in your area. HUD and VA spent a lot of time trying to figure out a proxy for a 3.16 alternative since we don't have client location in homes. They talked about zip codes, but there's not a great one-to-one, translation between a zip code and a COC. They looked at addresses. There was numbers of conversations that happened, and everyone recognizes that this is going to be potentially a challenge. But, they recognize that they'll have to work with the HMIS leads or whoever the point of contact is from the COC side to filter down on their end to get the right clients to you so that you don't have clients that aren't applicable to your COC.
Well, we do have lots of time.
I'll jump in real quick. Mary, since you're breaking up, I'm going to just talk over you for right now. The question was on slide 33. They think it was indicated that project and inventory records need start and end dates. If a project or inventory is still active, does it truly need an end date?
Sorry, let me back up the slide. Over on my back here. I'm actually not certain of that. Mary, do you have the answer on that one? Oh, which you're totally breaking up.
I'm so sorry. Say the question again, Brian.
Sure. Slide indicated that projects and inventory records need start and end dates. If a project or inventory is still active, does it truly need an end date?
No, it does not need an end date. An end date is not required. Is my phone better?
Much better.
I think I have to
yes. Another question.
Literally holding it up, trying
Hold it up over here.
Search for.
Did Jesse say that projects can only have a single COC code and cannot serve multiple COCs in a multiple COC HMIS implementation?
No. It can't have a single COC listed multiple times, right? So you can't have the same COC number listed twice or three times, which we see, surprisingly, in a single project record. But of course you can, and that's the point of 2.03, is to have your projects tied to multiple COCs if they exist, if they're funded to operate in multiple COCs. It's just you can't have a duplicate of the same COC. That's what that warning means.
All right. Can CARES homelessness prevention programs have the same entry and exit date?
And I think CARES, Homeless prevention program, same entry exit date. I don't know if we're shrinking that error message by project type or not. Probably not, but I don't know for sure. We'll have to get back to folks on that. When we post, you know, often when we post the Q&A for this call, which will be early next week, we, you know, have time to figure out some of those nuanced answers that we don't know off the top of our head. If you don't see it in there when we post the Q&A, do an AQ. Sorry. Go, Brian.
Yep. No, I was just going to say that there's a bunch of people asking for a link to the office hours to be pasted in the chat or the Q&A, but the link to the office hours doesn't exist yet because that hasn't been created, so that'll be going out through the listserv when that happens. There was a link on the other one, but it went to a different office hour, so it's not that we're not giving it to you, it's just that it does not exist yet.
Okay, I see quite a few assigned to me that I haven't read yet, but I think they got answered. Did we clarify if the errors and warnings and messages that will be coming through the data liaisons will be happening within HDX 2.0 or through Excel files? Jesse, do you know the answer to that yet?
It'll
and if
be
you don't,
both.
It'll be both.
So there will be Excel files that are transmitted through HDX. So they'll be posted up on HDX for communities to pull down. That makes sense? But it's not integrated into HDX in terms of it being sort of instantaneous.
Someone's asking that how-to guide for the LSA was mentioned, that it might be out later this week. Is that a thing, and can they expect that guide soon?
Yeah, so it's called the LSA Submission Guide, and it is on track to be released later this week. So it is a thing.
So I want to address Victoria's question because it's a good one and it's one for everybody to kind of like think about, right? Because this whole, I mean, obviously the HUD Bash, it's a tool. It's really being seen as like an opportunity, right? But it's translating to many folks on this call, and I mean, perfectly reasonably so, that it's a burden to try and integrate a CSV file into your HMIS locally, that comes with either staff resource costs or vendor, you know, vendors charge you to do that, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a tool. It is something that we hope is useful. And if the capacity isn't there immediately, it's, you know, it's not a requirement. We get that it feels like uneven, unbalanced, like some people are going to be able to add this in right away and some people aren't. And the minimum requirement, if you look back at the 2004 data standards, is that you have at least annual collection of the client served in HMIS. I know I'm probably going to bring up a whole man more questions when I say this out loud, but like really, and this isn't like you need to figure out the way to take in daily uploads of HMIS, you know, or VASH data from VA. It's when you think about reporting for your HIC, the HIC reporting happens in early 2021 this year, and then annually after that, and participating in HMIS, to say that on your HIC report says that you've got at least once a year you get data from about the client served in those beds. So I guess I just want to try and tamp down the anxiety a little bit, although I completely understand. I think we all completely understand that seems, though being presented as a tool, it feels like a burden. In the course of 2 or 3 years, we think that it will ultimately turn into a tool, and we would like you to think of it that way. I don't know the best way to say that. Fran might want to come in after me and clarify, but participation in HMIS is a big deal and something to think about, and this is a tool that is addressing an issue that's been out there for a long time with the lack of available data for people in BASH credit beds in your COCs.
No, that was perfect. Yeah.
If we could have this call daily, so you guys could get just immediately the information that's coming out. I mean, back to October is a really busy one, and there's a lot of feedback in these questions about how onerous a lot of this has become for HMIS leads in particular, right? If you add in ESGCD, bundling, and now have BASH data integration, and now that, it feels really big, and so there's no intent to surprise anybody with anything. We have these monthly calls. It's more frequent than it was as of a couple of years ago, right? We can't do it daily. We've got to be on kind of a monthly schedule and gather up all the information we have at the time to give to you when the calls come up. And October's busy. We're all feeling it. Is my audio still being weird? It is.
Kind of.
I'm trying to be reassuring, but it's probably just ending up more frustrating than anything else. So I will shut up now. Maybe while you guys, and I knew I could talk, I wanted to maybe end on a good note, and since we have a little bit of time, go look at the system performance measures data that's available, but we sure don't have to. We could just stay here if you guys want to escalate more verbal LSA and BASH questions. I'm looking for a feel from the group. No questions left. Did I go on mute?
No, I'm sorry, what was your question?
We just stay in the mode of answering LSA and HUD BASH questions for a sec.
I think that sounds right. There's a couple of people asking if we've talked about the point in time count yet. We have. You didn't miss anything. There's not an official announcement. We're still making a decision on the unsheltered point in time count, and you can keep an eye to the listservs for that. Still more people asking for a link to the office hours for the 28th. That it will also be coming in a listserv notice. So you just keep an eye out for those things. Couple more questions came in with some BASH stuff in the Q&A. Some more comments on the LSA, seasonal emergency shelter beds that require end dates. Is the end date indicated using the project end date or the project on the project setup page? That sounds like a vendor specific question. Mary, can I get a head nod to that one?
That what does?
The end date indicated on a project setup page, is that the same as the project end date?
Yeah, the data dictionary says it can be left blank. It can be null. So if you're being forced, and I have seen this on a few end products. If you're being forced to enter a project end date when you set up a project, you shouldn't be forced to enter an end date, right? You should be able to leave an end date. No. Meredith, am I saying that correctly? You should be able to leave
an end date null.
End date null,
not
project
ended.
setup. If it's not ended, it should be empty. If you're being forced to enter a date, that is a ticket for your vendor.
I'm going to just answer some of these VASH ones verbally because it's easier. Stacy, you sent a link in the AAQ or in the question box here for the VASH data. Yes, that is a link to the listserv that I was referencing. So that is the information, the most current information that's available from HUD. When the tool is released, I imagine we would probably do a listserv. And we will also have additional information, some commonly asked questions, and details about the data that is coming from homes to HMIS, what to expect in the report that you're getting from the VA Med Center. But yes, the link, this is the most current information. And my question box just moved because I thought I had another one. There was a question from Chuck. If the VASH import data is not updated continuously, won't this impact SPM reporting? So I think that's when thinking about, this is going to be a negotiation with you and your VA Med Center and the frequency with which it's reasonable and tenable for you to have this information updated in your system. So like Mary mentioned, annually so that it is up to date with the HIC. Maybe there is another point in time where you refresh the data, get an update from the VA Med Center, Medical Center before you submit SPMs. It's going to be something that you have to work out locally with your partners. There were a couple questions here about what data should be collected even about VASH. A little concerned that there's maybe a couple folks that think they are collecting what needs to be collected and they're not. So the information that I think you're referring to, Alicia, in your question here, yes, the PDDEs need to be set up for these projects in your HMIS, and then you would indicate whether or not they are or are not an HMIS participating project. But the data we're talking about is the universal data elements. So the client level data about the participants in the HUD VASH program. This then would enable these projects to be included in a variety of different reports, right? Like system performance measures, LSA, any other sort of maybe local or custom data analysis work you're doing for system planning or whatnot. But you would need that client level universal data elements. As a reminder, VASH, HUD, and VA agreed last summer-ish, last fall. They really stripped down the data collection requirements for VASH and limited it pretty much just to the universal data elements, and then the two, there are two VA, I believe, two VA data elements that are also collected on the HUD VASH program. So they don't collect any of the program-specific data elements or the common data elements like income and things like that. So it's a very minimal universal data elements for the most part.
Hey, Jesse. A question from Jesse. Ready?
Yes.
So uploads prior to 10:30 are mostly just to look for vendor errors, correct? Will we be told if there were issues and we need to re-upload before looking at data quality issues after 10:30?
So the purpose of the uploads during the initial upload period is to get communities acclimated with the interface, make sure they have the right permissions to submit, and then to also give your vendors a chance to sort of see the real data in the system. If you got your LSA accepted and it turned out that there were no errors or warnings or anything you need to address in your data, you would in theory not have to re-upload.
Jessica,
Amy, I
wanted
see
to
your
know
question.
if vendors have access to HCX2 to see your uploads.
Yes, they would. Actually, that's a really good question. It occurs to me that that's only in testing. Yeah, I'm going to need to clarify exactly how that communication is going to need to happen. But yeah, I'm going to need to clarify. I apologize.
We'll make sure to include that in the Q&A document that we send back around. Amy, I want to address your question about the doesn't seem to be updated in the manual, the changes I was describing about VASH. Those were added to or removed, I guess, from the manual in December of 2019, both in the VASH HMIS program manual and the data standards program manual, or just data standards manual. So you might want to double check that you've got the most current versions of those documents to see the right information.
I'm looking at a question here that I think is worth saying out loud the answer to, and it's kind of in the vein of, wait, isn't that a data quality error that should have already been taken care of by the vendor when you're going to enter data? So if you think about, like, you can't put a housing move-in date prior to a project start date. That's one of the rules of the data standards, but in theory, you wouldn't even be allowed to do that because the software would keep you from that. The software would give you an error at entry. But that isn't always the case. And there are software products out there that might allow a user to enter bad data and not shoot back a warning. So that's partly why we're bringing up warnings that are going to exist or errors that are going to exist in your data set. Even when it seems like totally irrational, that is a very, you should even, or a piece of data that should even be in your data set at all, it's just not always the case for every community. And maybe I was on my fuzzy phone, maybe warrants that being said by somebody else again, if that was unclear.
Someone wants to know if there's a written announcement that the LSA reports are due at the end of October.
So that went out on the listserv on the 9th. I also have an answer about the vendor access question if we want to go back to that for a second. So a vendor could be granted permission in HDX to view your data if the COC primary contact were to approve that, right? So if that was convenient to you and you wanted to do that and that works with the vendor, that's allowable. Or the COC can send the error file along to their vendor. Hopefully that clarifies that piece.
So Jesse, if there are errors, will you be informing the vendors, or does that fall on the system administrator to inform the vendors?
That will be something that is communicated to the COC via that upload file, and you will have to communicate that to your vendor.
Fran, can you clarify, or maybe Jesse, the listserv says that an upload attempt is due by the 30th of October. Does that mean that an attempt could be rejected with upload errors, or does this mean that an attempt is an accepted document or an accepted file?
It does mean an attempt, and I think the hope is that if you've attempted and it's failed, that you would start working with your vendor right away to get those issues resolved. Because otherwise, we'll just keep bugging you until we have success, right? So.
Justin, I see your comment here. Is there a way to support a connection between HMIS leads, vendors, and HUD, as all three need to be on the same page regarding any upload errors during this process? Allowing vendors access would essentially solve this problem. Just to be clear, that is something that is happening. So there's still support ongoing for HMIS vendors. They have a dedicated office hours call that they're working through every week. They are invited to the office hours. They have direct connection with the programming team that is managing HDX 2.0 and the apps team. So those conversations certainly are happening, and it is when there are issues identified, they are being brought to the vendor's attention in a group fashion through GitHub, through email communications, through a variety of other things. So we don't want it to seem that this is all now like being dumped onto the sysadmins, like you figure it out with your vendor. That ongoing support is still happening. They are aware of these issues, but they certainly would want to see probably your specific error files so that they know if there's some issue going on in your implementation that maybe they're not aware of, or that is different than anything else they've heard of. So I think that's why we're saying it's still important for you to be sending that file to them, but they're still getting support.
So I did want to respond to Jesse's comment about, you know, it would be helpful to know if other communities were having the same error, especially if you share the same vendor. So a change that we did make, so last year it was such that the vendor didn't come through in the file. So the LSA team that was working on it didn't know who the vendors were, and so they couldn't do any kind of analysis. That information will come through this time. The other change that we're expecting is that in that error and warning file, there's going to be some logic that tries to help triage the issues a little bit, that says, based on the way this error kind of manifests, we think that it would be good for your vendor to triage this versus we think this is something the COC could triage. So not that it's necessarily totally the vendor's responsibility to fix, but we just think it's most likely that something with code versus something in the data itself. So hopefully that's going to make things a little bit smoother this year.
Another question on the funding source with the projects who don't have any federal funding. If they use local or other funding source, do they still need to have a grant start date and end date?
Yeah.
And the LSA question we've got now is, they're going to download from HDX an error file, then they can share that with their vendor, just as they did in the past, and then the only change is that it's not being sent via email. Is that correct?
That is correct. One of the communication struggles from last year is that sometimes, you know, a community would upload a file, we would generate a flag file, send it to the community, and the community had already uploaded another file, and now they were looking at a flag file that didn't match their latest data set. So the hope is that it will kind of clean up that triangular communication, so that way it's clear what the most recent flag file is and what data set that's attached to.
Did you already address Austin's question about what how data quality is assessed on the destination of other? I know for every other report, it is considered unknown. Other is kind of the same as saying don't know, refuse. Am I coming through? Okay.
And that, yep, that's accurate.
Yep. We have, it says in the HMIS program manual about, or HMIS data manual about destination, that you're really supposed to find a thing that fits of like a known destination that's in the list. And if you can't, then you submit your example to the AAQ and we will help you determine what answer that would be. So like other shouldn't be used until you've gone through the AAQ desk in theory and had somebody weigh in on whether your destination is other or not. Hey, you guys have so many good questions. You're so smart. Such smart people. Thank you for being so smart and thoughtful. And we still have just a ton here that you've written in that we haven't had time to get to. And I think what I'd like to ask, I mean, I can stay on the line for a little bit after the call-ins and keep trying to plow through questions. And I'm not sure how long that can last, given the technology. I will say too, like if you put something in the AAQ or in the Q&A here on this call and you didn't get an answer from us, submit an HMIS AAQ, please. We really want to be able to walk through each of these issues thoroughly and provide good responses. We're also going to gather all of the questions that we got. Even if we weren't able to provide an answer to them on this call, we will download them and look at them and add answers to the Q&A if we can, where we can, when we post the Q&A next week. Does that sound like a plan, Fran? Is that okay?
I'm on mute, but yes.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect.
So I'm feeling so bad. I see a lot of questions left out there unanswered, but I don't think we have time to get to all of them today. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Even as much as we've been silently sitting here typing and answering questions, we couldn't get to them all. We appreciate your time. And office hours next week, right, for LSA. We'll get a link out through all the listservs so you won't miss it. We'll have this call again on November 18th, the week before the Thanksgiving holiday. So we'll run into that, and we'll have, I'm sure, lots more information for you. And so how do you make one disappear?
How do you make what disappear?
One. How do you make one disappear? How do you make one disappear? Put a G in front of it, and then it's gone.
I like that one.
Okay.
That's straight from the 9-year-old textbook that I get to be part of every day. So, hey, have a great rest of your Wednesday. We'll get you tons of feedback and for more stuff as we can. And thanks for participating. Thank all my mentors.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.